I guess a question I'm really curious to learn about from you is, as the CEO of a high growth startup, you know, from my point of view, the main challenge is to constantly scale your own competency so you can keep up pace with everyone else around you. So, how did you approach personal growth? How did you manage to scale yourself? And what are the sort of tactics that you can use to share with other people listening that are on a similar path?
Um, it's a good question. I'm not sure I did it all the way, but to the extent I managed to do so, I think being really, really, really open to feedback, even when it's deeply uncomfortable, is very, very useful. The best people I've ever worked with are sort of a sponge for feedback, and they don't. The best people are not those who begin their career most competent. It's the ones who improve the fastest. And I'm thinking of a couple of examples of just fabulous people who've just improved so quickly. And so seeking out the feedback and really, really, really working on it, I think is a big part of it. I think figuring out how other people like to be communicated with and like to work and adapting to that rather than the contrary, which is sort of assuming everyone's going to adapt to you. Um, and then finding people who are really, really good at what they do and just asking them loads of questions. So the Stripe founders were great, great kind of mentors for us, and particularly Will Gabrick, who started as their CFO and I think is now Chief Product Officer at Stripe. They just, they just, it's like going in, you're sort of starting year six at school or something. You're coming up from year five into year six, and you get the chance to talk to someone who just finished year six and has done all the exams and has made all the mistakes, and they give you their answers. And it's just much easier that way. And so there's no reason you can't go and ask people for their answers. They might not always be right. But it happens with Stripe, they mostly are right. But sort of learning from really great people who have done it very recently, actually. I find it less useful to talk to someone who's like, 30 years on from when they had this experience. But someone who's a year or 2 or 3 years ahead of you, I find that's very, very, very valuable.
So culture is one of those really fascinating topics in high growth startups, right? So, often very common story. No one gives a shit about it at the start because you're all doing proper work, you're all hustling. It's really, really hard. Things are fast paced. And obviously, when it becomes really important, it can often be a little bit late to do anything about it and very notoriously difficult to shape backwards. What was the experience of this at Monzo? Was it the former, the latter, or somewhere in between, do you think?
It was something we were extremely deliberate about from the start, actually, because, and I'm not sure we got it right all the time, but certainly we were conscious of it and deliberate about it. And particularly it came from my co-founder Jonas. He'd done Y Combinator before, so he and I sort of signed up for the same mantras. His company had been acquired by Groupon, and I don't think he loved that experience. And so he'd been in a big company for a little while and knew a little bit about what he didn't like, and was really determined to create a place to work that he would like, but also that would be kind of a beacon, I guess. It would be as inclusive as it could be, this way that we could attract the most talented, but also the most diverse set of people to come and do a great job. It was something we were very, very conscious of very early. We worked hard, but it was the earliest days were just the most fun. Really, the sort of from 6 months in to about 2 years in, I would say, it just was the absolute most fun we had. A small team, incredibly capable, working very, very hard, but that feeling of kind of camaraderie and being together and being able to accomplish so much with such a small team, I think just that feeling is, for me at least, I haven't yet experienced anything that beats it. Perhaps in future, but yeah, for me, it was just, yeah, it was great.
So, what would you say, reflecting on how good it all was, and obviously knowing that it's not all perfect, what would you say was your biggest challenge when it came to culture then? Were there any notable moments or times that there were slip ups or any experience shares that might give people a bit of an insight what to avoid in the future?
Yeah, a few. One was that we were so focused on kind of being empathetic and helping people that uh, the idea that we were a bank and we needed to make money was almost like antithetical to many people's beliefs. We just weren't hard nosed enough about making revenue or cutting costs. Um, I did all the fundraising pretty much single-handedly. And so for many of the other employees, which like tens of millions and eventually hundreds of millions of pounds that just appeared and paid their salaries, and they could like, work really hard to produce features that users loved. And I tried very hard to change this, and I think we did change it. But especially in kind of, year 2, year 3, probably, I don't think we worried enough about making revenue, making profit, because people sort of thought either it didn't matter, it wasn't. They didn't join because they wanted to make loads of money. They wanted to join because they wanted to help people. So that was one problem. But I think it's probably easier to correct from that to like, look, logically, here's why we need to be profitable and sustainable, than from the kind of investment bank extreme of just everyone is out to make as much money as possible and try and instill some ounce of humanity or empathy into that bunch. I think that's a harder job. I never worked in investment bank, so I don't know. That's one problem. The second problem was trying to combine the different cultures of mostly young, mostly very liberal tech and startup folks, and I would count myself and Jonas in that, with somewhat older banking people who we needed to create a bank, who were absolutely vital and super, super useful. I'm incredibly grateful that they joined and worked so hard to make Monzo what it is. But that was a cultural divide between the sort of older, experienced bankers and the younger kind of tech people. And that was tricky. And I'm not sure we ever really... I think now it's solved to an extent, but it is tricky.